The sights of nature, the sounds of hungry predators, the smells of... Yeah, the smells. Monster Hunter is back, and yeah, I'm thoroughly addicted to the grind, but between missions, a hunter's gotta eat, so whip out those portable barbecue grills because we're making the ultimate meal inspired by Monster Hunter Wilds. By the way, I'm gonna be showing off some of the locales in the game, so mild spoilers ahead. So we all know that Monster Hunter is king when it comes to tasty looking food visuals in video games. Now, is Monster Hunter Wilds better than Monster Hunter World when it comes to food? Well, that remains to be seen, but it does have some pretty epic looking food, that's for sure. One of the most common food scenes you'll see in the game is when you prep for a hunt and grill a meal. Doing so will keep you healthy and give you helpful bonuses for your fights. All you gotta do is pick a base, an additional ingredient, and some finishing touches, then get to cooking. What's cool is that the cooking cutscene actually changes and shows your character cooking the meal with the exact same ingredients you selected. The only thing is that the game only lets you pick one ingredient from each category, but that got me thinking, what if you want to make the ultimate meal that includes all of the available ingredients to make an epic monster-sized meal jam-packed with buffs that all hunters shall tremble to behold? Well, that's exactly what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna make 3 different meals. For the meat dish, I'm not entirely sure what meat the hunter uses in the game. I'm sure it's one of the many fictional creatures roaming the lands, but if I'm to find a real world equivalent, it doesn't really look like beef to me. The color and marbling kind of looks like pork to me, so I went to the store and the closest thing I found visually was this pork butt, which I think looks pretty close actually. For the fish, again, it's probably based on one of the many fictional fish in the game. Fish the hunter cooks with looks to be small with silver scales, so the closest thing I found in the store were these sardines, which I ended up having to descale, gut, and clean myself, which was super messy and almost as tedious as trying to find something in Monster Hunter's menu. For the veg, we're doing a wedge of cabbage exactly like the game, but before I cook these, I'm actually gonna work on the additional ingredients first, the first being the Kunafa cheese, which is an artisan cheese made in the Windsong village of Kunafa. This cheese starts as a ball that's then cut into slices, and from the look of it, I decided to go with mozzarella, which I think looks very similar. I'm gonna place these directly on the mains when we cook those later. Now, because we're using a lot more ingredients here, we can't one-pan it like the game, so I'll be cooking the rest of the additional ingredients separately. The next ones are drool shroom or delish shrooms. They look exactly the same in the cutscene, so I'm going to treat them as one. These grow in a secret spot known only to these cute little dudes known as woodwoods, and the mushrooms have a similar look to creminis, which is what I'll be using. Just gonna slice these up and fry them simple with some salt and pepper and some herb butter that I had in the fridge, and setting these aside for later. On to the next ingredient, we got mud shrimp and turbid shrimp. Again, looking exactly the same in the cutscene. These are nutritious shrimp native to the oil well basin and favored by the village of Azus. I wonder if they actually get them from the mud. My real world equivalent are these big and juicy jumbo shrimp that I'm just gonna pan fry in salt, pepper, and herb butter just like the mushrooms. Also add on a squirt of lemon. Once they have that beautiful pinkish orange color, they're all done, so let's set these aside. The next ingredients are fluffy egg and airy eggs, which are fluffy as the downy crake that laid it. We don't have any downy crakes in the real world. We'll have to settle for good old chicken eggs instead. We're gonna fry these sunny side up with a runny yolk for that drippy goodness. I'm also going to do this on medium-high heat to get that crispy crust like in the game, one of my favorite ways to prepare egg. Next is the silled garlic and specialty silled garlic, which are highly nutritious and fragrant bulbs of garlic grown in the settlement of Sild. Now the hunter just tosses it in the pan raw and cooks it for a few minutes, but I'm not about to risk biting on raw garlic, so since silled garlic is so special, I'm gonna go with a special preparation of garlic confit. Super simple, just heat up about a cup of olive oil in a small saucepan over medium-low heat and drop in about 20-ish cloves of garlic. We just want this to cook for a gentle low simmer until the garlic is lightly browned and soft. This probably took me about an hour on medium-low, and it is so worth it. Trust me. Now that we got our additional ingredients all set, let's work on the heavy hitters. Starting with the meat, I seasoned both sides of the pork steak with salt and pepper and onion powder. I usually put garlic powder also, but I think that garlic confit is going to be really intensely garlicky, so I decided not to put any. In fact, I'm actually going to use the oil from that garlic confit that we did earlier to fry up the pork. Heat a large cast iron skillet over medium-high heat for about 3 minutes, then add the steaks. Cook the steaks until browned, about 2 minutes per side, plus a few seconds on the sides to brown them up. Lower the heat to medium-low and continue to cook the steaks uncovered, and keep flipping the steaks for 5 minutes each side until they reach an internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit as measured in the thickest part. And that took me about another 15 minutes of flipping. Finally, add in some slices of mozzarella, cover, and cook for a minute to let it steam and get that cheese all melty. Now for the fish, this one's gonna take a lot shorter to cook. Just make sure to pat them dry first, then season each side with salt and pepper, then heat up some oil in a non-stick pan over medium-high heat and cook the sardines for 3 to 4 minutes each side. Now we're gonna add that mozzarella. I'm kind of skeptical about how sardines and mozzarella are gonna pair, but there's only one way to find out. For the cabbage, again, we're gonna add some of that garlic oil and heat that over medium heat and cook each wedge for about 7 minutes each side until it develops a nice char. Then toss in the mozzarella and cook that covered for a minute until gooey and melted. Now to put it all together, take the base and add on the sunny side up egg with a runny yolk and crispy edges. We're gonna add on our jumbo shrimp, then our shrooms, followed by a scattering of confit garlic. Then it's time for the finishing touches. First one up is some wild herb, which is described as having a refreshing aroma that can mask any foul odor. Now, when I think of refreshing smelling herbs, I think of mint. So let's chop some of this up and sprinkle on some fresh mint on our dish. Next is some Eastern honey. So let's drizzle on some honey for some of that added sweetness. The next one is jeweled mullet roe, which are fish eggs that truly shine like diamonds. At first I was thinking of using those orange fish eggs used on sushi, but those aren't usually cooked. So I checked out the game and I'm surprised to see it looking so grainy and powdery. I'm wondering why this is, and after doing some research, I found out that it's probably dried mullet roe that's being used, which is a popular condiment to be shaved over pasta or rice. The one that I ended up getting is Mediterranean Boutarga, so I'm going to be shaving this over our dish. Kind of expensive though, but we'll see if it's worth it. Next up is some wild seed oil, which is an oil that packs both flavor and the power of nature. The only seed oil I had is sesame seed oil, which is also a great finishing oil to add flavor and aroma, so I drizzled on some of that. Another finishing ingredient in the game is truffle du conga, which are dug up by these pink, furry, gorilla-looking congalalas. Now, truffles are super expensive, but I did find these small truffles preserved in oil that are still pricey, but definitely more affordable. By the way, to those who support me on Patreon, I cannot thank you enough for helping me continue to make cool content in this crazy economy. Now, I know I said I was going to include every ingredient, but I must confess, there's one thing missing. When I finished the game and beat the very last high rank mission, I assumed I already got all of the ingredients, but it was only after I shot this video that I realized that you could trade for monster chili with some of the NPC traders. Had I known that, I would have added some chili flakes on this, but for now, I'm just gonna have to imagine the heat. Do the same for both fish and the cabbage steak, and now we're ready to dig into our epic monster-sized Monster Hunter meal. I have super high hopes for this, not entirely sure if all of the flavors are gonna meld together, but I'm hopeful. Trying the pork first, beautifully cooked, super tender and juicy. Trying it with the mushrooms and runny egg is heavenly. The eggy pork kind of reminds me of that dish that you order from the Vietnamese restaurant, the one with the pork chop and the egg with rice. And the mushrooms are at its max intensity because of those shaved truffles. The instant I shaved these on, I got a strong waft of that mushroom aroma, and it really ramps up the umaminess of each bite. I get hyped now. Shrimps are perfectly cooked and have that nice bouncy bite. The hint of mint, the nuttiness of the sesame seed oil, and the added sweetness of the honey goes really well with the pork, and the mozzarella gives it such a rich and decadent texture. The mullet roe, I can't really pick out the taste, but trying a small chunk of it, it has that salty flavor with a hint of fishiness, which I'm sure contributes to the overall umaminess of this dish. And I know I missed the chili flakes, but I did sprinkle some on for my leftovers for the week, and it still works, but I actually prefer it without. I thoroughly enjoyed every combination of bite that I had in this dish. It's just an amazing medley of textures and flavors. I wasn't sure how this was going to work out, but I kid you not, this is probably one of the best things I've ever made. Thank you, Monster Hunter, for the idea, and I recommend you give this one a shot. But let's see if it works just as well with a fish. If the pork was one of the best things I've ever made, this one might be one of the worst. Sardines and mozzarella? No, this ain't working out for me. I think this might have worked better if I picked a more neutral tasting fish, but in this case the salty fishiness just clashes with everything else. With the egg it's okay, but with the sweet and the mint and the truffles, no bueno. What this dish lacks severely is some acidity, or actually a lot of acidity. I think all of the toppings work with the pork because the pork's texture and flavor are more neutral, which makes it a good vehicle for more complex flavors, but the fish is anything but neutral. I love sardines, but this ain't it. Now with the cabbage, okay, this works better. I love the contrast of the gooey cheese with a cabbage crunch. Again, cabbage is pretty neutral, so it's good with the shrimp, and I like how the seasonings work with it, except for maybe the truffles and the mushrooms. What I really like though are the charred parts that add that crispy, smoky taste. Not bad, but nowhere near as good as the meat. Well, now that I got my belly full and I got my buffs, it's time to go back to hunting. There's a lot more interesting looking food in Monster Hunter, so if you want to see me take a crack at those, just let me know in the comments.